Diplomats' Archives. Hidden Stories. This is the 29th story.
My name is Zamruni Khalid. I'm the ambassador of Malaysia to South Korea. In November last year, we hosted the Prime Minister of Malaysia to South Korea. And the most important deliverable during that visit was the elevation of Malaysia-Korea relations to strategic partnership.
About 4,700 kilometers from Korea lies Malaysia. And Korea and Malaysia, then Malaya, established diplomatic relations in 1960. 64 years later, the relationship was elevated to a strategic partnership. A strategic partnership signifies close cooperation across multiple fields, from politics and the economy to regional and global affairs. Among the various levels of international friendship, it is regarded as one of the higher forms of partnership.
The strategic partnership is a significant and exciting chapter in Malaysia-Korea bilateral relations. And as we celebrated this milestone, I suppose we want to look at our past as well, how the bilateral relations between Malaysia and Korea were created.
So today, we turn back to some of the key moments in the history of exchanges between Korea and Malaysia to bring those stories back to life once again. The first chapter of these hidden moments in the ties between the two countries opens in 1855 at the College General in Penang. The College General was established in 1665 in Ayutthaya, Thailand, by the Paris Foreign Mission Society to train priests in Asia. Founded in Paris in 1658, the Paris Foreign Mission Society's main goal was to send missionaries to non-Catholic countries across Asia.
The College General in Penang, it was a seminary which has its earliest foundation in 1665 in Ayutthaya, Siam. It was introduced by two monks who were French at that time. And they opened a seminary called Seminary of St. Joseph, later to be known as Seminary of the Holy Angels.
Later, following the Siamese-Burmese Wars and the ensuing religious persecutions, the College General had to relocate several times. From Chantaburi in Thailand to Hondat in Cambodia, and then to Pondicherry in India. And so, around 1809, it finally settled in what is now Pulau Tikus, Penang, Malaysia.
The seminary was eventually relocated to Penang in 1808 to 1809 because at that time Penang offered a more stable location because it was solidly under the British already at that time.
In 1809, Penang was under British rule, where the British took a relatively open attitude toward Catholicism. That is why the College General was able to settle in Penang. Yet, what kind of link could there be between this seminary and Korea?
The records show that many students came to the seminary from all parts of Asia, including Korea. Based on the archival photographs from Penang missionary schools, there were 21 Korean students who studied in Malaya in the late 19th century. This is a significant number at that time because, it was not easy to travel from all the way from Korea to Malaya at that time.
It turns out there were young Korean seminarians who had traveled all the way to Penang to study. An astonishing story indeed. Even more remarkable is the fact that according to historical records, their first departure took place in 1855, even before Joseon opened its doors to the world. To learn more about this extraordinary story, our team reached out to an expert.
저는 한국교회사 연구소 소장을 맡고 있는 서울교구 조한건 프란치스코 신부입니다.
Founded in 1964, the Research Foundation of Korean Church History collects and studies materials related to the history of the Korean Church. Here, we were able to see the faces of the young Korean seminarians who had traveled to Penang to study back in the 1880s.
신학교 사진이 있거든요. 이게 바로 이제 페낭 신학교 사진입니다. 여기에 우리 신학생들이 이제 유학생활을 했던 곳이죠. 근데 이것은 지금 건희 백화점이라고 하는 백화점으로 바뀌었어요. 이게 이제 부서지고 현재는 지금 옛날 별장 자리로 옮겨와서 신학교가 유지되고 있죠. 이게 밑에 이제 우도 신부님, 교수 신부님으로 있는 신부님과 한국 신학생들이 지금 찍은 사진이에요.
엄청 어리네요.
예, 13살부터 뭐 15살, 20살 이때 유학을 갔거든요.
Among the people in the photos, there were also boys who still looked very young. But how was it possible for them to study in Penang more than 100 years ago?
1850년대면은 이제 19세기 중반인데요. 우리 이제 한국 상황은 조선시대 후기에 천주교 박해 상황이었어요. 그래서 이미 파리해방 선교사들이 진출하고는 있었는데 이제 조선 정부에서 금지된 종교였기 때문에 숨어서 산속에 교우촌을 이루면서 살았어요.
Unlike in other Asian countries, Catholicism in Korea was not introduced by Western missionaries. Rather, it began independently, when lay scholars, driven by intellectual curiosity, encountered books on Western learning. In 1783, Lee Seung-hun was baptized in Beijing and returned to Korea with sacred objects and catechism books. After his return, he baptized his companions, and a community of believers began to take shape in Korea. This self-propagating and indigenous origin is regarded as one of the most distinctive characteristics of the Korean Catholic Church. However, over the next century, the Korean Catholic Church would face a series of persecutions. This was largely because Catholic teachings often conflicted with Confucian ideals, the very foundation of Joseon's state philosophy. In particular, the rejection of ancestral rites, which directly opposed the Confucian virtue of filial piety, became one of the main reasons for the persecution of Catholics. And in 1836, the first Western missionaries entered Joseon with the purpose of evangelization. They were members of the Paris Foreign Mission Society.
파리해방 종교의 신부님들은 그 나라 성직자를 양성해서 교회가 자생적으로 유지될 수 있도록 그 현지 사제를 양성하는 임무를 첫 번째로 하고 있었어요. 그래서 교우촌에 다니면서 이제 훌륭한 소년들을 뽑아가지고 처음에는 이제 서당처럼 한문도 가르치고 라틴어도 가르치면서 서당처럼 운영하는 신학교를 이제 운영하다가 거기서는 이제 철학, 신학 본격적으로 가르치는 너무 어려우니까 유학을 보내기 시작했습니다. 페낭은 아시아 지역의 신학생들을 교육시켜서 사제로 양성시키는 아시아 종합 신학교였어요.
Our team discovered something even more intriguing. Some of the missionaries sent to Korea by the Paris Foreign Mission Society had also studied at the College General in Penang.
two French missionaries who taught at the College General, namely Laurent Humbert and Jacques-Honoré Chaston, have directly missionary involvement in Korea. And they were known to be martyred in Korea. And the evidence from Penang sources said that Father Chaston taught at College General in 1828 to 1830. The other monk, Father Humbert, he served in Penang before his appointment in 1836 as Vicar Apostolic to Korea.
여기에 보면은 그 안중근에게 세례도 주고 마지막 구해성사도 주신 빌림 신부님이 있어요. 빌림 신부님도 한국에 오시기 전에 페낭 신학교 교수 신부로 처음 선교사 임무를 했거든요. 그래서 이미 조선 신학생들을 만나고 계셨고요.
But Penang was not the only place where Korean seminarians studied abroad. Some were sent to Macau, where the so-called Far Eastern Representative Office of the Paris Foreign Missions Society was located. Among them was Saint Andrew Kim Dae-gon, the first Korean Roman Catholic priest and also a martyr.
파리 본부에서 아시아 선교를 위해서 극동 대표부를 만들거든요. 그래서 초기에는 마카오에 그게 있었어요. 그래서 마카오 본부에 있었을 때 김대건, 최양업, 최방재 신학생이 그 본부에 가서 신학 공부를 했고요. 지금 페낭으로 유학 간 분들은 처음 초기에 1855년에 최양업 신부님이 뽑아서 이제 국내에서 한 1년 교육시킨 다음에 나가사키를 통해서 보내요. 나가사키에서 홍콩으로 보내서 홍콩에 1년 또 수학하다가 페낭으로 보내거든요. 그렇게 세 분이 간 걸로 되어 있고요. 그리고 그 이후에 1882년부터 84년까지 순차적으로 21분이 유학을 갔어요. 그러니까 페낭에 유학 간 신학생은 한 24명 정도로 보고 있습니다.
It was the late 19th century. What might their journey have been like at that time? Here, at the Research Foundation of Korean Church History, we were able to see the records left by the seminarians who had studied in Penang at that time.
가톨릭 청년이라고요. 이게 이제 1934년도예요. 이제 빈랑 유학기라고 해가지고요. 빈랑이 바로 빈랑이라고 이제 한국어 발음하잖아요. 빈랑은 페낭을 가리켜요. 그래서 유학 회고기 해가지고 김성학 알레시오 신부님이 유학 갔던 시절을 얘기해요. 여기에 보면 이제 강도영 마르코가 20살이었는데 나이가 제일 많았는데 강서방 부르면서 같이 유학 간 이야기가 여기 실려 있어요.
Through the memoirs of Father Kim Song-hak Alessio, who traveled from Incheon to Busan, Nagasaki, and Hong Kong before studying in Penang, we were able to glimpse their journey.
While in our homeland, white snow was falling and the streams were frozen solid in the depths of winter. Here, the days were scorching, as if the very air were on fire with midsummer heat. Still, Mr. Kang, being the eldest among us, somehow managed to take apart his padded trousers and jacket, pull out all the cotton stuffing, tear away the inner lining, and put the outer shells back on. Then, stepping out proudly, he said with a triumphant grin, "Look here, boys, this feels wonderfully cool," and urged us to do the same. We immediately followed his example. After a while, Mr. Kang called out again, "Boys, look at this," pointing outside. There, upon the deep blue waters of a foreign sea, drifted a lone topknot, cruelly cut off and left to wander. We looked at Mr. Kang's head, and at once we knew where it had come from.
However, after arriving in Penang, they approached their studies with a very serious attitude.
since the school rule required that as people from many different countries were gathered together, no one should use their own native language, but speak only in Latin. It was quite difficult for us at first when we entered. However, with the resolve that we must first open our ears and loosen our tongues, we studied diligently. And after 2 or 3 months, we were able to communicate freely in Latin. Not only in Latin, but also in other subjects, we quietly strove not to fall behind others for the honor of Joseon. And as a result, achieved excellent grades.
After their years of study in Penang, how did life unfold for them back home in Korea? That question stayed with us. And so, we turned to another expert for answers.
저는 송란이라고 하고요. 한국교회사연구소에서 학술이사를 맡고 있고요. 그리고 주로 이제 제가 하는 거는 한국 천주교 관련 자료, 유럽이라든지 말레이시아 페낭에 있는 자료라든지 그 자료 수집하고 정리하는 작업, 그걸 통해서 이제 또 전시하고 연구하는 쪽의 일을 하고 있습니다. 그 3명은 돌아왔지만 신부가 못 됐고, 그런 다음에 그 이후에 간 신학생들은 돌아와서 한국에서 공부를 더 해서 신부님이 되셨죠. 신부님이 되신 분도 있고, 신학생으로 해서 한국에 돌아왔지만 또 이제 사제가 안 된 경우도 있고, 그렇죠. 네.
Those who studied abroad in places like Penang and Macau returned to Korea, and some of them later became priests, going on to have a significant impact on the development of the Catholic Church in the country. They would also contribute to the establishment of the first seminary founded under the leadership of Koreans themselves.
나중에 1885년경에 부원골의 신학교에 있다가 1887년에 용산 신학교가 세워져요. 개항기 이후에 우리 자체 신학교가 생기는 거죠.
강도영 신부님 같은 경우에는 굉장히 오래 또 미리네에서 계시다가 사제 생활을 잘 하시고 돌아가시기도 하셨고, 또 한기근 바오로 신부님도 공부를 하시고 돌아와서 공부 마치시고 사제가 되셔서 한국 천주교회의 굉장히 많은 부분에 중요한 일들을 많이 하셨어요. 그분은 또 로마 여행도 다 다니셨고, 또 한국에 있는 그 중요한 성경들을 복음서를 번역하시기도 하셨고, 그런 중요한 일을 많이 하셨죠.
About 3 kilometers away from Pulau Tikus, where the College General once stood, lies Tanjung Bunga. Here, we can find a building known as Mariophile. Mariophile is a place that was originally developed as a retreat center for College General seminarians to spend their holidays. Today, College General is located just below it. And here, records of the Koreans who studied in this place still remain.
그 페낭에 가면 그때 우리가 보냈던 신학생들의 생활기록부, 그다음 성적표 이런 게 남아 있어요. 아직도. 그게 이제 세월이 오래 지나다 보니 그 자료들이 훼손이 많이 돼서 저희가 이제 작년에 한번 그 페낭의 신학교에 가서 저희 자료를 다 보존 처리를 해주고 그렇게 하고 온 경험이 있어요. 그래서 이런 것들이 남아 있다는 거, 그게 참 중요한 자료가 아닌가라는, 한국의 유학사 전체적으로 따져볼 때도 굉장히 앞부분에 있는 자료고 중요한 자료가 있지 않는가라는 생각이 들고.
And in Penang, the remains of several martyrs associated with College General are enshrined. Among them also rest the remains of Saint Andrew Kim Dae-gon, the first Catholic priest of Korea and a martyr who studied in Macau. In the Catholic tradition, the relics of important martyrs or clergy are often enshrined in multiple locations. This is why part of St. Andrew Kim Daegon's remains are kept here at Mariophile.
그런 자료가 한국 관련된 자료가 많이 남아 있고 한국에 대한 것들을 많이 알고 계세요. 거기에 계신 분들이.
The College General Penang Seminary has played a crucial role in the spread of Catholicism across Asia. It is also a center of producing moral witness via martyrs whose lives and deaths have strengthened the faith of multiple nations, including those in Vietnam and also Korea. It would not be an exaggeration to say that without the institution like the College General, the map of Catholicism in Asia today would look differently from what we know now.
The second chapter of these hidden moments in the ties between Korea and Malaysia opens in 1966 in Paju, Korea. About 35 kilometers from Seoul lies the city of Paju. And here, we discovered a bridge with a curious name. The Malaysia Bridge. This bridge was built with Malaysia's assistance in 1964 and was completed in 1966.
Malaysia at that time, although we were also a new nation, a new country, newly independent and not very rich at that time, but as we find an ally in South Korea, so we thought that it would be good an act of kindness to help South Korean people at that time by donating not a very big amount of money, 5,000 US dollars at that time to South Korea to build bridge in Paju, which later to be known as Malaysian Bridge in Paju.
On August 31st, 1957, a new nation was born, the Federation of Malaya, gaining independence from Britain. And in 1960, the Republic of Korea and the Federation of Malaya took a historic step, establishing diplomatic relations. In 1963, the Federation of Malaya merged with Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore to form the newly established Federation of Malaysia. Then, in 1965, Singapore left the Federation of Malaysia, finalizing the formation of the country as it exists today. So what were the circumstances that led the two countries to establish diplomatic relations at that time? We decided to pose that question to this person.
한국외국어대학교 말레이 인도네시아어과 명예교수입니다. 제가 국내에서 동남아학을 박사과정으로 일찍 시작한 사람 중에 한 사람입니다.
Professor Yang has, from the past to the present, actively conducted research and taken the lead in introducing Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, to Koreans. Conversely, he has also played a leading role in promoting Korean studies in Southeast Asia.
말레이시아도 세계의 국제사회로 나가야 되고 한국도 그런 입장에서 어느 나라보다 서방 세계하고 가까운 나라들하고의 교류가 필요했습니다. 이게 그 국제 정치학적인 배경이라면 실질적인 이유는 말레이시아는 자원 부국입니다. 한국은 그 자원을 수입을 해서 수출해야 하는 나라입니다. 말하자면은 부족이 꼭지가 꼭 맞는 그런 형태의 국제관계가 맥락을 이루었다고 보고 있습니다. 아마도 두 나라가 제 판단으로 결정적으로 조금 더 다른 경우에 비해서 가까워질 수 있었던 것은 양국이 가지고 있는 반공 정책이 아니었나 하는 생각을 가지고 있습니다.
At the time, following the Korean War, South Korea adopted a strong anti-communist stance, focusing nationwide on the communist threat, strengthening its military ties with United States, and ensuring national security. So why was Malaysia implementing an anti-communist policy during that period?
For us in Malaya, we were under the British rule, and then until the Japanese also came to Malaya in 1942 until 45. We were also under the Japanese rule. And then when they left in 1945, the British came back. And after that, we had an insurgency, basically by the communist insurgents, and they fought a war with the British colonials from just right after the war until 1960. So basically, for Malaya and South Korea at that time, what was established was a Cold War alignment, because we were together in fighting communism. And since we gained independence in 1957, Tunku Abdul Rahman, the first Prime Minister of Malaysia, he was really anti-communist. And so that's why he was trying to find allies who share basically the same political thinking.
In this context, one could also argue that the strong anti-communist policies present in both South Korean and Malaysian societies served as a common foundation linking the two countries.
The ROK's diplomatic strategy at that time under President Ri Singman, he was also very anti-communist. So it was decided by Malaysia at that time to have a relationship with South Korea. So this was established in 1960, on the 23rd of February 1960, when we formally established diplomatic relations.
Against this backdrop, Malaysia provided South Korea with a sum of $5,000, which was used to construct the Malaysia Bridge in Paju. As time has passed, this bridge is no longer in use, but it has been designated as a registered cultural heritage of Gyeonggi-do Province and is carefully preserved to this day. But why Paju? Why was the bridge built here and not anywhere else? We decided to meet with a curator from Paju City Hall to hear more detailed stories behind the bridge.
이제 설립되게 된 거는 이제 전후 복구랑 관련이 굉장히 깊은데요. 파주는 6.25 전쟁 당시에 접경 지역에 위치해가지고 그 피해가 매우 컸었어요. 당시에 이제 파주에 있는 거의 모든 기관 시설들이 다 소실되었기 때문에 이거를 복구하기 위해서는 간선도로의 복구도 굉장히 중요한 사안이었거든요. 이 말레이시아교가 위치한 이 지역도 국도 1호선이라고 해서요. 이제 당시에 한반도를 종관하는, 남북으로 종관하는 그 도로의 일부였습니다. 그래서 1964년도에 이 다리를 복구할 계획을 세우고 1966년도에 완공을 하게 되었습니다.
In 1911, a 939.1 kilometer road was constructed, connecting Mokpo in Jeollanam-do Province to Siniju in Pyeongan-buk-do Province. It later became the predecessor of what is now known as National Route No. 1. During the Japanese colonial period, this road was built on the basis of newly constructed routes, absorbing existing main roads along the way. Even before that, this road was known for connecting the north and south of the Korean peninsula and for being frequently used by many people to transport grain from the fertile southern regions. It was this very road that later became the foundation of National Route Number 1. However, during the Korean War, much of the Korean peninsula suffered extensive damage. Many of the bridge-like structures that once connected the road, the predecessor of National Route Number 1, to smaller surrounding roads were also destroyed.
이제 그 국도 1호선의 정비 방향으로 이 다리를 놓게 된 겁니다. 주요 간선도로였기 때문에 이 길을 복구하는 게 가장 큰 사업이었습니다.
In this way, the Malaysia Bridge played an important role in connecting the road that preceded National Route Number 1 with the surrounding roads. Thanks to it, the living conditions of local residents were greatly improved.
경기도 파주군 등원리에 말레이시아교가 준공되어 지난 19일 개통됐습니다.
And when the Malaysia Bridge was opened, many residents gathered to celebrate together.
길이 60m, 폭 7.5m의 철근 콘크리트로 되어 있습니다.
이 말레이시아교의 특징이라고 하면은 이 상판과 난간을 비롯한 거의 모든 부자재가 콘크리트로 굉장히 튼튼하게, 당시로서는 굉장히 튼튼하고 견고하게 만들어졌고요. 그래서 상당히 이용량도 많았습니다. 대외적으로 서울이라든지 고향에서 파주로 진입하기 위한 차량들은 꼭 이 다리를 건너야 했고요. 대내적으로 파주에 거주 중인 조리나 광탄에서 거주 중인 주민분들은 이제 당시에 행정 중심지였던 금촌이라든지 문산으로 가기 위해서는 이 다리를 많이 이용할 수밖에 없었습니다. 말레이시아교가 현재 이제 경기도 등록문화유산으로 등재가 되어 있는데요. 이게 한국전쟁 이후에 국가재건이라는 게 가장 큰 이슈였고, 이제 많은 정부적인 관심을 갖는 사항이었고, 당시에 냉전과 그런 외교적인 관계 속에서 이제 그런 단면을 엿볼 수 있는 중요한 자료로 생각되어지는 게 이 말레이시아교라고 판단을 해서 경기도 등록유산으로 등재가 되게 되었습니다.
Perhaps it is thanks to the Malaysia Bridge that this area appears to symbolize the friendship between Korea and Malaysia. Even a nearby road is named Malaysia Bridge Intersection. So, after the Malaysia Bridge was completed, how had the lives of local residents changed in detail? Our team met a resident who has lived in this area all his life to hear his stories about the Malaysia Bridge.
그때 제가 중학교 2학년 15살이고요. 그러니까 그 전에는 밑에 그 납작 한 50cm 정도의 높이에 한 3m 정도로 해서 그 칸칸이 한 1.5m 정도로 막아갖고 거기에 한 12개 정도 걸로 걸어 다니다가 비만 오면 못 다녔죠. 물 빠지기만 기다렸다가 다니고 그랬어요.
The Malaysia Bridge has been a very important landmark for the local residents. Although vehicle traffic was suspended after 2022 and another bridge was built next to it in 1988, he says that there are probably very few residents in the area who don't know the Malaysia Bridge.
저기 신호등 앞에 버스 정류장이 있습니다. 그 버스 정류장의 명칭이 여기는 고산천, 저기는 고산골, 여기는 고산교. 이렇게 다 고산으로 돼 있지만은 말레이시아교로 돼 있어요. 저 이름이, 버스 정류장 이름이. 그렇게 상징적으로 해서 여기가 아주 진짜 이 근방에서 말레이시아교가 대명사입니다. 진짜로. 우리가 굉장히 어려웠고 나라에서도 사실 제대로 관리를 못했던 거를 그래도 원조를 해서 이런 교량을 만들어줘 갖고 우리를 참 편안하게 해줬기 때문에 참 좋은 나라라고 생각을 하고 또 고마움을 많이 느끼고 있죠.
Yes, I went there last year. As I stood on the bridge, actually, I was overcome by emotion because the bridge to me symbolizes friendship between Malaysia and South Korea. We were not a rich country at that time, but it showed that we care. The friend in need are the friends indeed. So that shows how close we were at one time, and then also up until now. So it symbolizes the long-running relations between South Korea and Malaysia.
The bond between the two countries, which began about 170 years ago. That connection was rekindled through Malaysia Bridge, bringing the people of both nations closer together. Yet, there are still many untold moments of exchange between the two countries that remain largely unknown to us. And the hidden stories of Korea and Malaysia will continue in the next episode.